So anyways, this is living with a Tantabus, or recovery is a strange horse. So, to start, this is Sweet Song, an innocuous little pony from a weird set that I bought way back in, I think it was September of 2011. Thanks. And I've been carrying her around for about a year and a half now as my, well, a little less than a year and a half, but as my token of my sobriety. When I say everywhere, I mean everywhere I travel, I usually have her with me. Everywhere. And over here is the first time we ever ran this panel, Equestria LA. Oh, my mouse doesn't show up there. The one in the corner there is the badge from Equestria LA. So the whole part of this is to talk about addiction, recovery, how the show relates to it, my experiences, and then to pinwheel off of that and talk about mental health as a whole and why it's important and stuff like that. But like any good scholar, I'm going to start with a glossary of terms so that if I'm throwing buzzwords and that sort of nonsense out there, everybody understands what's going on. So we got some terms. We're going to start with My Little Pony, the definition of that. I've used this joke twice. There has never been a more relevant time to just, if you're here at BronyCon and you don't know what My Little Pony is, I am sorry you wandered into this lost. You must be so confused, and none of this is going to help. So, Brony. Jokes aside, you should know, but really, you should know. But it's an adult, especially with starting out, I was in the fandom very early. It always implied, Brony usually implied male, but nowadays the term's loosened up a bit. Pegasister was also thrown around, but it's a fan of the show, and usually an adult fan of the show as well. Addiction. This is where it starts to get a bit fuzzier. So the medical definition I found on, I think it was dictionary.com, but also referenced with some medical stuff. They say, habitual and psychological and physiological dependence on a substance or practice beyond one's voluntary control. Urban Dictionary says, safely saying that you can quit something as long as it's next Tuesday. And that one speaks for itself. It's something you deal with long after you've stopped. But what's recovery? And this is where the definitions start to go out the window entirely. Different people have different answers for what recovery is from an addiction. Some of the stuff, my experiences, I don't really do Alcoholics Anonymous so much myself, but I know a lot of people going through it, and I know a lot about it. Their success rate, like their actual success rate, as study shows, doesn't seem very high. I don't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but it's also a terrible indicator because for some people, just being sober is enough. For other people, being sober is not enough. I think at one point, even for me, just the first month that I wasn't drinking, it was worse, almost worse than anything it had been when I was still having problems with it. And it's not a permanent thing either. It's not suddenly like you're miraculously recovered. It's something you work with and deal with the rest of your life. And as you can see there, last one, not clearly defined either. So, next one. Is it moving? It's supposed to be moving. Oh, okay. Tantabus. Vaguely, it's Latin for nightmare. It's different variations of spelling on it. But this will be important later. Is it moving? Okay. Just checking. PowerPoint's being weird. Anyways, in the show, it's a representation, a physical and dangerous representation of Luna's guilt. And it's also a very good metaphor for addiction and guilt, a very burden that you carry with yourself in the wake of self-damaging behavior and the addiction itself. And then we come to what is me, or who I am. Oh, don't clap over that. It's such a stupid joke. Yeah. A little about me. I grew up, and mostly lived around a place called Rochester, New York. Any Rochester people? Anyone from what, Buffalo? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I lived in Buffalo for a while. That's pretty sweet. I got into the show around 2011, March 2011. Kind of by accident. A friend showed me Applebuck season, or she was watching it with her boyfriend at the time. And I was just like, it would be hilarious to make this was before even people thought of PMVs. I was like, it would be hilarious to cut this up into a drug PSA, like an anti-drug PSA, like don't do drugs and all of this. And then a month later, that bit's a little bit fuzzy, but a month later, I'm just like, I have watched every single episode of this show 5 times. So March/April of this year marked 5 years for me of being a brony, which is strange because that is almost my entire adult life. I'm 25. But I'm also someone who went through some pretty awful things, most of which I'm going to leave out. But at some point, I began drinking. I think it was around the age of 20 or 21, and things spiraled out of control. When I came to this show, it was like, my life is great. Things are going well. I lost weight. I got a girlfriend. Everything was going well in my life. And then it just, love rots and dreams die and the world goes to crap in no time at all, especially when you're dealing with something. And part of the problem was I was using alcohol to get away from it and some other stuff too, which culminated in December of 2014 with a suicide attempt. Sorry, it's just looking back at the scope of stuff, I did some things that I'm not proud of and still carry with me. And on top of that, the stuff, alcohol, and there were some other things that I'm leaving out for the sake of those young in the audience and for the sake of not reliving any of it. But this number changes a little bit. That's what it was at the original one. There's parts of my life which are just kind of missing, that I don't have recollection of, where I know where I was because I was in college for 2 years. People knew where I was part of it, but it's just gone. Oh, that's really horrible and depressing. So why don't we talk about ponies instead? Yeah. So, first off, the question I've had some people ask me when I start talking about, like, this show is a good tool for talking about recovery and how addiction happens, all of that is, isn't this a kid's show? And? Lauren Faust, who I've met and thanked for creating this show several times through cons, she said something like, I want something when adults, like when parents sit down with their kids, they're not going to want to claw their eyes out when they watch. And that was the goal, is to make a show that's just good to begin with. Even if it is aimed at kids, the idea is to have good production on it. And there's no reason that a kid's show shouldn't deal with adult stuff. This was especially true in season 5 when you saw stuff like, what was the episode? Tanks for the Memories, which is the 5 stages of grief and dealing with death. And the only part of it that isn't actually death is he's in hibernation. They got as close as they could. And there was a bunch of other stuff where it deals with adult things. And it didn't cease to be a kid's show. It's still a good kid's show. Kid's shows should deal with this stuff. And just because it's relevant to my experience and just because I've seen this arc and seen it as a tool of recovery doesn't necessarily mean they intended it that way. I'm interpreting off of something. That's a thing that can happen. Anyways, there's a couple episodes of the show that also are just good metaphors for how people end up addicted and stuff like that. Applebuck season, why I'm a brony, I saw this. But there's a lot about how you become an addict in this one too. It's like, she refuses to admit that she has a problem, and she keeps trying to deal with it herself, and that's something that's big in AA too, is just admitting that you have a problem and you might not be able to take care of it all on your own, is that you have to be able to seek help from other people. And it's also a decent representation. I had a problem with caffeine too in my life. It wasn't as bad as alcohol or any of that, but it's an accurate thing of caffeine addiction where you're dosing yourself up with more and more to try and get stuff done, and you just don't realize that you're not being productive to begin with. And that's part of how addiction happens, is you need something to help you, like say caffeine, and you start taking more and more of it, but not realizing that you're getting less and less from it, or that you're becoming more and more detached from reality. It's also just a great episode. This is another one, and it's not subtle at all. It really reminds me of the Tommyknockers, which was Stephen King's book of him dealing with his cocaine addiction at the time. And it's Spike trying to be honest with her is like sometimes how you have to be when you approach friends to say, listen, you have a problem, or when people are trying to approach you. There's a good thing in that. And again, it's another one where you get so caught up in this inspiration or this thing that you think is helping you that you don't realize it's long gone past that point and into, what's the word I'm looking for? Depreciating? Degrading you. It's gone past the point of useful and is actually damaging. It's detrimental. That's the word. There is an addict hidden in the show. And I know it's a bit of a stretch, but the arc of this character over the 5 seasons of the show, at least at the time I've done this panel, I watched season 6 and there wasn't really much they added to this character's story. But it's like all the stuff they go through the course of this is what it's like to be in an addiction and start to come back from it too. And still fluctuates, but she's like in the top 3, if not top 2, despite, Applejack having that for years. Guesses? Anyone? No. Twilight's a good one. Nope. Wow, this is the first time no one's just immediately shouted it out. Okay, so here's some other possibilities. I seriously thought about this one, but she is not it. They have not gone far enough with her character. I like her despite everyone hating her, because like her, I have done some awful, awful things in my life, and now I'm trying to make up for it. So I identify with her on so many levels. Plus I'm just obsessed with time travel, and let's face it, I don't care what anyone else says, season 5 was the best finale.
Yes, thank you.
Some of you said Rainbow Dash. Not quite. Though there are a couple throwaway jokes, hers are different. They are relevant. She does still deal with anxiety and other things, but the way she puts it off aren't the way other people deal with it. Cheap joke. Continuing cheap joke. But no, it's Luna, actually. Hence why it's named Living with a Tantabus, because it's a metaphor, right? It's okay. I shouldn't have been so flippant about it, but and every other time I've done this, everyone's immediately been like, Luna! At the top of their lungs in my face, and I'm like, yes, so I have to go through all those slides of the other ponies making jokes awkwardly about it. Thankfully, it worked out this time. Thank you. So, yes, Luna, yes. The part of the way I look at this is Nightmare Moon isn't a separate character. Nightmare Moon, the concept of what Nightmare Moon is to Luna is a drug. And her character arc through the show that we see is her recovering from having been part of that drug. And she's not just a background pony either. It's like you see her continuously because she's a part of Authority, because she made such a big difference in the show. We see repeated episodes of her. So there's enough to develop. That's one of the reasons I haven't talked much about Starlight Glimmer. One of them being that she doesn't have, her recovery and stuff is different, and the other one is she just literally has not had enough episodes yet. She's had 5-ish, 4, 5, 6-ish, not like Luna, who's spread out across seasons. We've got a couple ones, and some of them are literally just like, Starlight's here. K. Fabulous hair. That's a good reason for anything, right? Fabulous hair. But now I'm going to go over like how in the show, how this is like a path of her becoming an addict. One that starts how addiction happens. You don't just start drinking and suddenly lose control. There's plenty of people who can, on a regular basis, go out and drink and have a good time, or use even some people I've known who can use some pretty serious drugs and just be able to put it down and walk away from it. They have a handle on the experience, they know how to use it. Those on the harder drugs are very, very few people. But on alcohol, there's plenty of people who they have a beer every once in a while, and that's part of life. I was almost at that point too, but where a lot of people become addicted is there's some issues. Maybe it's family difficulty, which is in Luna's case, and self-image issues, also in Luna's case, where you end up seeking the alcohol as a way to get away from your problems. Society has created this idea that alcohol is your way to get out of it, and it's just like alcohol numbs the pain. Anybody who's been really drunk when they've had something awful happen knows that is the opposite of the case. In fact, being drunk usually makes everything feel worse. But there's this myth and you buy into it, or maybe there's something else going on in your life and you see the alcohol as a way to get away from it. And maybe the first couple of times you go out drinking with friends or whatever, it does feel pretty great and you think this is the way to solve anything. But the thing is, the more you use it, the less effect it has on you, and the less it wasn't really helping you to begin with. The alcohol was probably a way to just say, okay, I can put aside the problems for myself. But you didn't realize you were saying that. I didn't. My father was an alcoholic as well. Well, was. Point being, it was in my family, and up until I was 20, I didn't drink myself. But when I was 20, I was like, you know what, I'll try it. And then I kind of lost control over it for a little bit, but then I got it back. Then a lot of things went wrong in my life, especially regarding in a relationship, and then it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. But most of the time, even when it was the most detrimental to me, I was maybe having, in some cases, just like a beer or two a night, and I didn't think it was a big deal, but I didn't realize I was so dependent on it. But anyways, moving on. Like I said, it's an escapism, but it's not a healthy way to get away from your problems. And slowly, it takes over your life the same way. The way I thought of it is, listen, Luna's having all these issues with her sister, right? And there's this, whatever it is, this power, this strength that is Nightmare Moon, that aspect of her. And maybe the way it works, and it seems to me from the way the way it works is she kept going back to it and back to it because it's like this way to separate yourself and it makes you feel good, but you don't realize slowly it's taking you over. It's corrupting you, especially in her case. And then she hits that point, which this has been in the one, and when you start to get really, really bad in your drinking, people push you away. And you maybe don't understand why it's happening. You think they're abandoning you. Now, there's a point where literally they're separating themselves from you for your sake and theirs, for their safety and your safety, because you've lost control of your behavior. And obviously, Nightmare Moon is a very extreme example of this. So, there's something that has to happen. I don't remember if AA talks about this, Alcoholics Anonymous talks about this, but I know it's happened in my life and a lot of people. There's a point where you just bottom out. In my case, somehow it wasn't my suicide attempt, but it was pretty close to that. It was some other things that had happened which maybe weren't as worse as that, but you could even say the suicide attempt I had was that point. You have to hit a point sometimes when you're dealing with an addiction or when you're still in the addiction where it is so bad, life comes back and hits like a hammer. You end up arrested, you end up in the hospital. Something happens that's so bad that it forces you to have perspective on reality again. Like, oh crap, this is really a problem and I need to deal with it. For me, I think Luna hits that point when she comes back as Nightmare Moon after 1,000 years of being away, or somewhere in the point between banishment and all of that. She comes back and she hits that point where she has done so much damage, and then she just, she gets the elements of harmony to the face, and you're not ready for it, but then all of a sudden you're back in reality. And you see that in the moment where she's like, I'm so sorry, dear sister. I know it's one line, but she runs up crying, and that's the point where you've hit the turn, where you're admitting that there's something wrong, where you're admitting you've got something you need to deal with. And from there, it's mostly up. It's not easy, but you're on the way up. And you have to want to change too. Sometimes people bottom out and they don't learn, and sometimes those people end up dead or in jail for the rest of their lives, or they never get a handle on it. In a way, I'm really lucky that I didn't succeed for many reasons, didn't succeed in trying to end my own life, but it's just like, it was enough of a bad thing that I realized I wanted to change this. I wanted to get out of this. Some people never have that point. Some people never bottom out and they just drive right off the cliff without realizing it. Maybe literally. Oh, there we go. But she hits that point and she decides things have to change. And then there's the tricky part, is adjusting to life being normal again. It's a joke. Laugh. But it's the part where you have to adjust to not being in that culture of drinking anymore and realize that people are still, oh wait, we don't want that one yet. People are still going to be put off by you, and that's what I see in the Nightmare Night one, or is that the name of it? Luna Eclipse is the episode where she comes back and people are still scared of her and she doesn't get it. Now that one has a bit of a different turn too, because it's the Halloween, people enjoy being scared, but it's also the distance of, she did all these awful things and that's some of what people remember her for, and you have to come to terms with, yeah, you deserve a little bit sometimes. Keep an open mind about this, but sometimes you deserve to get that derision from others. It's like, you gotta take responsibility for the things you did wrong. And I think part of that is part of what happens in that episode, although like I said, it's a different twinge because of the whole Nightmare Night thing. But it's also her realizing that it's, okay, I can talk about these things that happen. I can admit that I did something wrong. And you have to be willing to be forgiven too, which doesn't happen right away for her. And okay, we'll move on. And it's also about learning not to let go of things necessarily. You can't pretend that things didn't happen, and I think maybe Luna wants to do that a little bit. But you have to understand that they happen. It's not letting go of the things, it's saying, okay, they happened, and being able to move on. Moving on, The Nightmare Remains. I still believe this. Do princesses dream of magic sheep? I'm a big fan of the original author of the book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is where they got the title. This may be, yeah, Philip K. Dick, fantastic writer. But anyways, this is one of my favorite, and I think one of the best episodes of the show, though some of the jokes in the dream are maybe a little hokey. It's someone facing up to guilt in a way that I've never seen. Adult shows don't deal with this the way, like addiction, the way this episode handles it, and like guilt of things you've done in the past. As I wrote there, adult shows don't fucking touch this stuff. I also am a big fan of Eldritch Horror stuff, so seeing this magnificent, giant Eldritch Horror Titan about to walk in and destroy reality that is my fetish. But anyways aside, it's this whole huge thing of her being, she has not forgiven herself in this. That's what I meant by the other one. People in that, she realizes in that episode that people will forgive her, but the thing is, she hasn't forgiven herself. I still have not forgiven myself for some of the stuff I've done. I don't think a part of you ever does, but you have to start. And this is the part where she's faced with her guilt, what she blames herself for, in the most dramatic and big way possible, and they bring it to a resolution. So I'm just gonna.
I cannot hold this dream together much longer. Equestria will fall because of me. Am I crazy, or did it just get even bigger after Luna said
I'll hear that well, right?
I think it's feeding on your guilt, Princess Luna. If that is so, then perhaps that is how it grew strong enough to escape in the first place. Say what now? I created the Tantabus to give myself the same nightmare every night. To punish myself for the evil I caused as Nightmare Moon. But why would you do that? To make sure I never forgave myself for how much Equestria suffered because of me. But it seems I have not learned my lesson. For now I have only made you suffer more. But that means you might just be the key to stopping all this. Yeah! If it gets strong because you feel bad about what you did as Nightmare Moon, then you just gotta stop feeling bad for what you did! How can I forgive myself? I am no better now than I was then. My creation is about to turn the world into a living nightmare! But look at what you're doing! Nightmare Moon would have wanted the Tantabus to turn Equestria into a you can to stop it. Don't you see? That proves you're not the same pony you were then. Every pony who knows you knows that Nightmare Moon is in the past. We all trust you, Luna. Do you trust us enough to believe we're right?
I do. Thank you. Thank you all.
Sorry, just give me a moment. I still can't watch this clip, like, without without being like this, because that is exactly, I had those moments, and to see this episode in this show, it was the point at which I started talking about all of this, realizing how much the show had helped me. I'd been in pretty bad shape when I first started watching the show, but right around the time I started trying to sober up and trying to fix everything was the season 5 premiere. That's the part I forgot. It's the worst year of my life, when everything went from bad to Chernobyl levels of meltdown. It was in that year the show was missing. And I'd started to realize that the show was helping me get out of this death spiral that I was in. I was drinking for a good 5 months after I tried to kill myself, still, not realizing what it was. But the season 5 premiere happened, and then I decided to stop, like a week later, stop drinking altogether. And I've been sober since April 13th, 2015, and counting. But it wasn't until I saw this episode and I saw that moment that I really realized how much this show had helped me. I realized how much I identify with Luna in that. There's so many times where you look back, and I nearly ruined a couple people's lives through what I did. And I had friends when I was still drinking, and then when it got bad, I managed to alienate every single one of them. Some of the people in this room, some friends here are some of the first friends I've had in a long time. And to see this, going through still blaming myself, and then to see her doing the same thing. And then Twilight makes the point, you're trying to change. And if you're truly trying to change and you're truly trying to do your better behavior, you're already doing so much better for yourself and everyone else than you were when you were drinking. And no matter how, you still might screw up. I still did a couple times. I did all right, but I'm not the best case to look at. I was able to quit cold turkey, which part of me regrets, but some people go to Alcohol Anonymous for years, still end up drinking, but then it helps them. I would not, if I were to do it all again, obviously I wouldn't start drinking. But if I was at that point where I had to quit, I would not try to quit alone again. But anyways, what Luna goes through is that blaming yourself. I think every addict does that. And I think even people who've been recovered for 20, 30 years still blame themselves for things they did. And before you can start saying I'm sorry to others and other stuff, this is one of the steps, is you have to forgive yourself. You have to accept what you did, but you also have to accept it's the past. And the fact that you're even trying to get sober, the fact that you're trying to better yourself is better than what you were doing when you were drinking. You weren't trying to stop then. You didn't realize what you were doing. You were in this cloud, you're in this state. There was some monster version of you, like Nightmare Moon, doing all that stuff. That doesn't mean that's who you were. You were the ones doing it. You were the one doing it, but you weren't in your right mind when it was going on at all. But you realize that, and even when those monsters of the past, like a Tantabus, come up, and it's horrible, and it's still, there can be repercussions years and years after you've stopped drinking of things you did while you were. But the fact that you're trying to change, the fact that you're trying to move forward, makes all the difference. And that's what they say there. It's like, we've long since forgiven you what you did wrong then. And we're trying to help you now because we care. But it's hard for us to move forward with that if you can't forgive yourself. And there's a part of that, why I said I didn't want to quit drinking alone, and it's very difficult. The other part of it is, there's a part that only you can do, and that's say, I want to change, and that's not necessarily wipe clean the slate, but understand what you did, take responsibility for it, and say, I realize I did this, but I wasn't in my right mind then, and I'm trying to move forward. And then the next part of it, next slide, there we go. A moment. Excuse me. Next part of it, this is one of the things I like that Alcoholics Anonymous does, is people go to the meetings long after they stop struggling with the problem too. Some people have trouble staying away from it the rest of their life. Some people are probably good after a couple meetings, but one of the other parts is giving back. Part of the reason you can go back to those groups is to help other people who are going through it. And we see that with Luna too, in the CMC episodes. Even before she's forgiven herself, she's going out and she's saying, listen, I understand, in each of the episodes, and I love those episodes too, she's saying, listen, I understand what it's like to be alienated. I understand these things you're going through too. She's trying to help them because she understands the position they've been in, each of the Crusaders and those ones. And that's part of it too, is you're trying to helping other people sometimes shows you ways to help yourself you didn't realize. It's a bad example, I didn't really like this one, but in this season there was the Applejack's Day Off, and at the end she's like, well, I didn't realize people keep doing things because they think they've got it figured out, not realizing that there's better ways to do it because they've been stuck in the routine for so long. And then they help her fix the farm with all the stuff that she's doing wrong in her routine. But this is part of it too. In helping other people, you're helping yourself. Not only are you really doing the right thing by trying to help other people, you're also going to see things in them that you know are in yourself that you didn't think about before. And maybe helping them through their problems is going to give you perspective. And maybe, this happens too, they have perspective on your problems, even though you're way ahead of where they are. Or you might have perspective on someone's problems who's been miserable for years. You see something they don't. So there's two parts of it. It's not only the doing the right thing and helping others, you're also helping yourself by helping others. And there's a big emphasis on the show, and there's an emphasis with this in the Brony community. Although sometimes you run into hostile bronies online and all this other stuff. At the time I ran this at Equestria LA in 2015, August of 2015, the stat came out that on the record, and at that point the show, we were around 4 years as bronies, as a community, had given just $950,000 to charity. And the people who put out that stat said, and that's all we have specifically on the record, specifically bronies in these cases. We think it's much higher, and it's definitely higher than that now. I mean, at that con alone, there was a ridiculous amount of, do you remember, Preston, how much went? A lot, there was a massive amount at that con alone that went to charity. The whole part of this community, at the beginning, one of the things I loved about this community the most, and still do, is the impetus of people to help each other. They took the message of the show and the love and tolerate and the friendship, but they really took that as help other people. And there's so many people that came to the show looking for an escape that ended up realizing one of the ways to get away from violence and negativity in life is to go out and help people and just say, I'm not going to contribute to making everybody else miserable. I'm going to make someone else's day good. And they're going to make friends in all of this, and it's going to help move the world forward. And while things are rough, definitely rougher than when the show started, and rougher even than last year right now, there's still charity auctions. They're still pushing things forward. Helping people is part of how, I lost my train of thought, here we go. Helping people is part of how you help yourself. And there's nothing stopping you from doing it. Even if, okay, so you don't have money to give to charity. Well, if you just maybe hold the door for someone or just try to do something nice, and don't do it with the intention of saying you're welcome. Do it without even telling them your name. Just help someone for the sake of helping them. and they're going to do the same thing. People think that, being aggressive to other people is viral, it's infective. Like, you're mean to someone else, they go on to be mean to another person, and so on and so forth. Kindness works the same way, even if it doesn't return right away. And it's no harder than being a dick to someone. It really isn't. And that's part of the point of this section anyways, is that there's hope. I went through some awful stuff, but I'm here. People have gone through stuff that makes mine look like I tripped over a rock in the park and maybe scuffed up my knee a little, and they're still here. There is hope. No one's beyond fixing. It might not be the way you thought it was going to happen, certainly. The way I came through things, I didn't think. I had this idea for the longest time in my head that I was just never going to be better, that I was going to hurt people again. But I'm not. I'm still thinking that. Little parts of me are still thinking that, and then people tell me I'm nice, and I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you helped me with this, this, and this. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's just to make up for the fact that I was an awful person. And they're like, oh, we don't care about that part. You helped. There is hope. And especially with everything that's happened in recent days, recent years, it's far between, but it's still there. It's maybe just a little harder to see is all. But hard-pressed, even though there's also negative things that came along with the Brony fandom, like negative things that came along with anything that surges up this quickly. This show changed so much in the way the internet acts and the way we think of things. But this is the most important part of the panel to me, and it's something that's grown as I've done the panel, is talking about mental health. I think it was Bernie Sanders, I think it was him, who said that, and it doesn't matter political affiliations on this, he said, addiction isn't a criminal problem, it's a medical problem, it's a health issue, and he was right. So much addiction doesn't come from necessarily, people don't just suddenly decide to develop a drug habit. It doesn't come from one bad choice. It comes from a lot of things, and more often or not, it's the way they try to deal with whatever issue, anxiety, depression, other stuff in their life. They try to deal with it with drugs, and it seems to work in the beginning, but in the long run it doesn't. That's how it happens. Like with the problem with heroin getting as big as it is people get addicted to painkillers because they had some legitimate pain, and then they no longer have the subscription, and then someone tells them that the heroin is from the same opioid family as a lot of those heavy painkillers, and so they use that to get the same feeling, and it goes downhill from there because heroin is terrifying, literally terrifying. Ugh. But anyways, moving on, if you can start to take care of your mental health and deal with issues in healthy ways and find other ways other than drugs to deal with them, you can avoid these addiction issues. And addiction doesn't necessarily have to be a substance either, if you think about it. People can be addicted to buying lotto tickets. I worked at a gas station overnight. I saw a lot of people who dropped ridiculous amounts of money to break even. When you become dependent on something, it's not just necessarily, there's a lot of drugs where the actual physical dependence doesn't last that long, even if you're addicted. It's the psychological component of it, and that's why it's so hard to deal with. Because if it was really as easy as getting someone unaddicted or recovered, it's just throwing them in a room for 3 days with food and saying, no, you're not having that until the physical part of it passes out of your body, it would be nowhere near as big a problem as it is. The good part of it is mental. And you can be addicted to a lot of other things too. Binge eating and stuff like that, other stuff. But so many of those things, it's not that the addiction itself is a problem, it's that something else was a problem to begin with. And you sought the drugs or whatever else to deal with it because you didn't know how else to do it. It's what it became with me, and I knew, the worst part of it is, I knew at least part of that is that people seek the alcohol and all that stuff to deal with it instead of seeking the right ways. I knew the right ways, and I still ended up saying, well, no, I'm better than this, I'm not addicted, and then you're dependent on it, and you don't want to admit it, and so on and so forth. But the thing is, there's so much with anxiety and depression and mental health. This country, the US, does not take it very seriously compared to other places, and it's part of the problem. And we don't even think about it. There's a stigma about being depressed or anxiety. And I know with some of you, it's kind of like I'm preaching to the choir here. It's like, yeah, I know I have all these things and I'm dealing with them. But it's like so many, the mainstream media and all of this, the mentality in the country is not in favor of mental health. I think you're just supposed to deal with it. And it's, like I said, it's just as important as physical health. I can't say it's more important. The two of them are tied. Mental health is as important as physical health, because if you can't get yourself to a mentally healthy state, you're going to make poor decisions. Things are going to happen to you in, I had a different way to phrase this. Sorry, this is a little bit new territory on the panel, but it's just, mental health is very important. Dealing with these issues can make your life so much easier, and it's also very easy to prevent addiction and stuff. And it's also just, alcohol and that stuff is not the solution. You can still enjoy it. Some people still do. I have not. I have a bad habit of picking up cigarettes now and then, but I can put that one down. But when you become dependent on something to treat another problem, you should have just been treating the other problem in the first place. But getting back to why this is relevant to all our favorite little pastel colored icons, the amount of people this show has helped is ridiculous. I can't tell you. I wrote an article in 2011 for the school paper at the school I was attending, UB. I was going to college there. I wrote an article about how many people I'd gone around and talked to, friends of mine, some of mine who were just the ultimate stereotype of a tough guy. You know, he's a tough guy. Had a collection of knives, knows all this karate stuff that he doesn't really know, but he watched it on YouTube, so he thinks he does. He goes to rifle range regularly and blows stuff up and is like, yeah, and all the stereotypes of manly. But he had so much stuff. He and I grew up together. There's so much stuff he went through. He loved this show, and part of him wanted to hide it, and that's an issue of masculinity and for another panel entirely. But this show helped him deal with stuff in a way he hadn't before. And the more people I talked to, just talking to friends, Bronies I knew, so many of them, it was like, this show is an escape for me. But it's not an escape that causes people harm, other than, you know, being addicted to buying plushies. But that's neither here nor there. It's a joke. But the show allowed people to find a way to escape the rough part of reality. And the things are, in the article I talk about it, it's like, it's a place where people still talk about hope. Equestria is a place where people talk about hope and they look at things and they still are like, we can do this. And you don't see people do that much in real life. But it's not impossible. And to have this place where things are still dangerous sometimes, I mean, I did a count somewhere of how many times, just in like season 5 alone, someone was in a life-threatening situation. It's hilarious. But at the same time, it's not a dark world. It's not someone's crappy grimdark fic where everyone has died, everyone will die, everything is ruined forever. No, the Equestria walks this great line between being a dangerous place and a great place. It's not everything is depressing, but not everything is just sugar, sunshine, rainbows, and all of that either. I probably named 3 ponies there. You can use that. Go ahead. But the point of it is, it's a world that's realistic in that people have problems, but you still can live a day-to-day life. There's danger, but people work through it together. And I think a lot of people take from that. And there's also just, you know, it's a funny show. It's a well-made show. There's catchy songs and all of this. And there's this community there that, especially in the beginning, was just about, let's not be dicks to each other. Let's all be nice to each other. Love and tolerate was the chant, the mantra. And people took it to heart. And so many of these guys, like tough guys and all of this stuff that I knew put up facades, I did some of it myself. I still do on occasion even. But it's like they were drawn to this show because it's just like, you don't have to be this angry person. You can be unabashedly enjoy something. And that was the case with this show. And it changed things. And there's other reasons people say the show helped them and all this. Like, I mean, look at what I just talked at you for how long we've been here. Like 40 minutes. I just talked at you for 40 minutes about how much this show helped me in a way that I don't know if it's helped others in a similar way, but it's like, this show helps people a lot. I have endlessly, 2 times I've run into Lauren Faust at conventions and I've just been like, I would literally not be here anymore if it weren't for this show. I don't think I would have been able to pull myself together. And I know I'm not the only one. this show made a difference, and that's part of my whole point of this panel and all of this, is to talk about not only is there hope from addiction, there's ways hidden in all sorts of things to deal with it. This show does it in a great way by having this subtle character, and I know it's not something they necessarily intended, but it's a good example. Now, I don't have all the solutions for recovery for everyone. My story is very different than others. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, there's other stuff. There's even just talking to people and recognizing that you have a problem can help you move forward and deal with things. And the same thing goes for mental health and anxiety and all these other things too. It's the same way. Trying to see a professional about it, there's a stigma about that, but there's nothing wrong with seeing someone. Trying to talk to other people, trying to understand what it is, and trying to better your life is the best choice you can make. It's not, everybody has mental health issues. The people at the top have a lot of mental health issues. Some of them deal with it very well. Some of them dye their hair orange and comb it over and try to build walls and all of that. I'm sorry. I'm a pretty left-wing guy, but I don't think anybody likes.
Registered Republican, and I don't like Trump.
Yeah. Point being, yeah.
Coincidentally, that's what my last name is, Floyd.
Yeah, but the whole point is there's a lot of people, like, people get even all the way up to the top and they still won't admit that they have issues that they're dealing with. Even if I'm used it to make a political jab. Point being, there's a stigma in this country, and don't be afraid to say, I have this stuff I need to deal with. Because the other part of it too, like I've been trying to say, is if you can deal with those issues, you make it so much more, or so much less likely that you're going to end up having problems with addiction down the road. If you try to treat it with just, okay, this makes me feel good, I'm not going to bother with it, I've got this, that doesn't work forever. You got to have more than one solution and all of this, but seeking help to deal with your other anxieties and issues in life is part of the way to stay away from addiction. It's sort of a way to keep from relapsing too. But, and this is a little depressing part of the note, there's no set point where you can say I'm recovered. I have a decent handle on it, but there's still other times where I'm really close to lapsing on something else. There's no one solution, because it's not a yes or no thing. Problems are never in real life just solved with one thing. There's a lot of stuff that goes on to it. If it seems like it's one thing, it's a bunch of little things that are piled into to make it look like one big thing. You will probably have to deal with it for the rest of your life, but the fact that you even try to deal with it, again, puts you ahead of so many others. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on. Let's go to a joke, and then we'll just open the floor up for some discussion.
My name is Twilight, and I'm an alcoholic.
Princess Twilight, this is a Crusaders meeting.
Is it? Or is it you fillies can't admit you have a problem? Don't cry for me. I'm already dead.
That's based off a Simpsons episode where they have a bunch of movies and one of the town alcoholics makes the same thing. But it's just a joke to wrap things up. Our stuff's get serious. So I'm going to open the floor up now if anybody wants to come up and just like they have any questions or stuff they want to say. We got about 13 minutes left-ish. So yeah, are you going to set up, you got a microphone? All right, so I guess just raise your hand if you got questions. Hi, this gentleman over here. We'll get him one.
One second.
Okay. All right. And if there's any comments you want to make or questions or any of that, feel free to ask. The gentleman in the yellow over there was the first person I saw to raise his hand.
Okay. So I remember there was a while ago somebody made a couple of videos about Luda's, like, I forgive myself was too easy. What would you say to that? And by the way, I agree with.
What would I say to that? She nearly destroyed an entire country before she forgave herself.
I mean, like in the episode, it's like she says, "I do," that. Was that too easy?
Is that too easy? No. Because here's the thing, the whole time, the point that they make, and this is, you can't ignore the rest of the show, she helps the CMC. She's constantly trying to help other people. It's, the disconnect is not between, it's just, okay, there's two parts of this. I'm remembering the other part of this. The first part is it's like she realizes she has been helping people in all of this. And the only reason I feel like it might be too short is the limitation of 22 minutes. But the other part of it too is just because she's forgiven herself then doesn't mean this is over either. That's why I said living with a Tantabus, not like I had a Tantabus. I said this at some point. I don't think I did a good job of describing it in the panel, unfortunately. You keep blaming yourself long after you hit that point as well too. There's always a little part of you that's saying you did all this stuff wrong, but it's not big, and there needs to be a point. This one's a very dramatic shift, and I don't think Luna's forgiven herself for everything either, but I think she's hit that point where she realizes this is the next step forward, and she realizes that all these people are trying to help her deal with her problem. That's the other thing you notice in the beginning of Princess's Dream of Magic Sheep. I'm still gonna screw that up. In the beginning of the episode, she's even just pushing away Twilight, like, no, I've got to deal with this myself. No, I've got to deal with this. And over the episode, you see everyone's trying to help her. She accepts more and more help, and it's realizing, I think she realizes that people care about her. And while it might be, the problem is people will paint it as, okay, she's had that moment, that's it, that's the end of that story. Well, no, it's been 5 seasons leading up to that point of her forgiving herself. And in the show, issues people have come up again. Spike's a sort of good example for this, where he has a solution and then sometimes it's not fixed and he falls into the same traps. That's how people are. But this moment is a big shift, and it was a long time coming for her. I don't think it was an easy one. Sorry, I overworded that. Anybody else? I see that gentleman in the back there with a hat. I'll try to get as many of you as I can, and I'll try to shut up and keep it short so that I'm not, wait.
Hello.
Hi.
I think you made an important statement about the stigma of mental health, especially when it comes to understanding how society looks at mental health. In many ways, it's considered a weakness. And as far as accepting help, it's very easy for a lot of people to say, oh, well, you need to accept help from people. But when, I guess that goes back into the stigma, is sometimes it's very, very difficult to get help because you yourself don't want it to appear weak.
Oh yeah, I know that. I still have a really bad habit of doing that myself, actually.
Yeah, guilty as charged here too.
Yeah. There's, from things that have happened to me in my life, I have trouble asking other people for help. That's a part, unfortunately, I don't have a one simple glib answer to, because it's something I still struggle with. I'm conscious of the fact, and I try to say, okay, I know the reason I'm not seeking help right now is because I'm feeling guilty and I need to get over that before I detriment myself a little further. But yes, there is a stigma of seeking help, but the thing is, what's more important, this image that you think society wants you to be, or not being in hell, not being in your own personal little hell? And I could understand this is a huge part of it, because peer pressure is a real thing. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. That's why DARE and some of those other say no to drugs ones didn't work as well as they thought it would, because it's just not that simple. But recognizing that there is a stigma, recognizing that you are trying to seek help, and even sometimes just letting yourself be a little vulnerable and ask for help are ways to move forward, and just being aware that it's a problem.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to say, if anyone's going to give you crap for seeking help, just screw them. That's what I say. You're helping yourself.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Anybody else? Okay, that guy right behind this young lady, and then that young lady, if we could do it that way. And I'll try to get as many people as I can. What's my, cutoff? 7-ish minutes? Okay. I'll try to stop talking so much. I have a really bad problem with talking way too much. I'm so sorry, guys. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. This gentleman here.
Thank you for sharing parts of your story. It's good to hear.
Could you hold it just a little closer?
Sure. Thank you for sharing parts of your story. It's good to hear. It gives you the feels.
Yeah.
I came down here from the People Behind the Ponies panel.
Yeah.
And some of the voice actors were talking about they got this silly question about pancakes or waffles, and they all chose wine for some reason. And yesterday there was like this bar trot starting this BronyCon. How does it make you feel that some of the key people in the show are bringing alcohol into it?
It's tricky. This is one of the parts that I really don't know how, because I handle it better than other people. Some people, it's impossible to be around alcohol after you sober up. And that's one of the other problems that I sort of let go by the wayside. The U.S., no, I'll take it back. Humanity, the human race as a whole, has this giant problem with loving alcohol way too much. I still have non-alcoholic beer whenever I can. I love beer for beer. I love the taste of beer. It's bitter, I'm bitter, we get along. And it's the other part of it is it's not necessarily just drinking a lot is not necessarily a problem, and the other part of it is not all of it is necessarily, it's degrees of the problem. Maybe they have a little bit of a problem, but maybe they'll figure out a way to deal with it before that. Maybe it'll get worse. Alcohol being present can be tricky to deal with, but on the other hand, I'm a writer, and I can't remember what play it is, but there's a play where they're talking about, it's just like, he's like, writers drink, actors drink. If you're in the performing arts, there's a reason they refer to it as liquid courage. And while I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, I also really, really understand why. I, for once, this is the first time I haven't been like a paint mixer shaking before a panel. Sometimes you just need that little shot of something to get you through. And sometimes that actually works. The point is, if you become dependent on it, if you think it's going to save you every time, it's not. But I can understand where people have issues with the amount of alcohol being around alcohol after it. Yeah. Sorry, yes, I tried to little this late.
Hi, I thought your analysis of the episode was pretty good and pretty awesome. It's the one with the Tantabus is one of my favorite episodes as well, because it does deal with the idea of self-guilt a lot, which really is not something you see in a lot of TV shows, but this is a realistic problem that a lot of people deal with, especially people in high-stress careers where they want to help, you can't always help, and it's hard to deal with. So I thought this episode was really good, and a great base for that.
Yeah. I really liked season 5 as a whole. Season 6 hasn't had as many episodes, but season 5, and part of this might have been Larson's influence, but other people too, it just deals with so many things that adult shows don't go after. One of the ones I think of, I actually like the American Sherlock Holmes, what is it, Elementary? I actually like that one a bit better than the British Sherlock, and I know that makes me a heathen. But this one, so many times when I watch Elementary, the American one, they spend so much time actually dealing with his addiction. And it's another rare show where they do that, where they handle what addiction's like really, really well. But a lot of shows don't touch that, and that's what I loved about this episode. It takes something so heavy and manages to work it into a kid's show in a way that's not overly obtrusive. 3 minutes? All right. Like the other one that comes right after it is Amending Fences is another good one, where it deals with a very adult concept, and it's very well plotted out. But then again, I look up to Larson way too much. All right. I think we got time for like one more. Anybody? And the other thing is, I'll be around afterwards if you got personal stuff you want to say or just want to talk or any of that, or just the panel's out of time. So everybody raise your hand. I'm going to point in a random direction. There's no one over there. You're close enough. Sorry. I'm over there. Yeah.
First of all, thank you again. I know that couldn't have been easy.
There's a good 80% of my mind that still doesn't realize I'm on a stage giving a panel yet.
Good.
Don't remind me. I'll start freaking out. Oh, God.
Anyway, you've spoken a lot about dealing with this yourself. What's Was there any kind of help that you wish you had had as these different stages of addiction and recovery were going on that you found particularly difficult to find or that people didn't understand?
Oh, man. If I had a book, if I had 8 books, if I had a dictionary, if I had like one of those giant encyclopedia collections, I still like books. I still like actual books, especially because you can throw them at people. I'm kidding. I know the guy. But it's just like, yes, there were a lot of things. Some of it I just knew and I didn't know the way to approach. But the other part of it is, and why I said I would need those books, is because it's different at different points. Sometimes what you think you need isn't what you need. Sometimes like you desperately need something, don't know where to find it. It's the tricky part. There's no one way out of it. I think that's the trickiest part, is there's no surefire way to get out of it. If that was true, it would be nowhere near as big a problem as it is. Especially, the biggest part of it is the psychological component. With the exception of, I think it's alcohol and heroin, most of them, physical addiction, the actual physical part of your body that needs it, clears out in about 3 days. I know that's definitely true with cigarettes. But the psychological part, the part up here, can take months, years, the rest of your entire life. You might not have it nailed down. And that's not just limited to addiction. Mental health is difficult, and the only way to deal with it is to just try everything. Well, not everything, but keep trying to find ways, and maybe you'll find what you need. Maybe, this is the case with a lot of stuff in my life, serendipity will step in, and you'll find something you didn't realize you were looking for. Yeah. That's all the time we have for panel. Thank you all so much for coming. One last thing. If you're looking to find me anywhere on the internet, these are the places, particularly Twitter. Call me Cadejo, because I go by Cadejo Jones. Then there's some other stuff. I'm still associated with the Children Defense Aid. There's a blog there, steelbrony.blogspot.com. There we go. And a film fiction, which is not really getting updated anymore. And also, I'll be around after the panel if you got questions for me. But thank you all so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of BronyCon.